And he knows too the trials, the ecclesiastical trials we would call them. Trouble in the church. After all, he is the office bearer in the church, has been usurped, and now he is cut off from the worship of the church. And that for him was a most grievous trial. And all of these enemies are stirred up by his spiritual enemy, the devil. David's real enemies are spiritual, as are ours. Sin, death, hell, and the devil. Notice he calls his enemies the wicked. They're not simply soldiers, they are the wicked. Those who are opposed to God, those who are raging rebels against God, who have broken God's law. They are the enemies of God himself. And therefore they have become the enemies of David. And notice his chief concern here in this psalm is not that he should be protected from his physical enemies, but that he should be not put away in anger. Verse 9, hide not thy face far from me, put not thy servant away in anger. And David knows that God has every right to be angry with him. Because why did Absalom stir himself up against David? Because of the judgment of God against David for his sin with Bathsheba. David knows that. Put not thy servant away in anger, please David. That's his concern. He even has to fight against the unbelief of his own heart in verse 14. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. He's telling his soul, wait on the Lord. Wait and see what God is going to do. God will be faithful. It all seems hopeless right now, but God has promised he will be faithful. We make the same confession in the midst of darkness, because this life is a battlefield, just as much as it was for David. Not a physical battlefield for us, with spears and with swords and with arrows whizzing around our heads, surrounded by cruel foes, as David knew. But it is a battlefield, a spiritual battlefield. We know persecution. We know people who mock us and laugh at us because of our Christian profession. And in the future, the Bible tells us, we will also know physical persecution. Just as much of the church today knows physical persecution, and they too can say, the Lord is my light and my salvation. We experience too financial difficulties. Everyone's talking about the economy. A struggling economy, financial hardships, things getting more expensive, people losing their jobs, and Christians also experience these hardships in the midst of life. We know too sickness and disease. Some of us know that more acutely than others, but all of us know what it's like to be sick and to have affliction in our bodies. And death is coming to take away each one of us. And we know too afflictions in our families. Some are married to unbelievers, and that causes untold grief. And some experience the trial of seeing their children turn away from the Lord as they become older and no longer attend the church of Jesus Christ. What sorrow! What sorrow for a godly parent to see that. And behind all of these are the terrible realities of sin and Satan and hell. Because all of these happen. All of these trials happen because of sin in the world. God has cursed this world because of man's sin. There's violence in this world. There's sickness in this world. There's death in this world because of man's sin. And we know our own sinful nature, which as it were rises up within us as a host of sins which seek to overwhelm us and destroy us. And we must battle day and night against those sins. And the devil, who wants to keep us in darkness, and drag us down to eternal darkness in hell, is always attacking us and surrounding us with his demons. And we are threatened on every side. In the midst of all of that, all of those trials, all of those difficulties, our sins and the devil, in the midst of all of that, we can confess, like David, Jehovah is my light and my salvation. He is my hope. He gives me joy. He gives me comfort. I trust in him. He guides me by his Spirit and his word. He shines upon me in his favor and in his love. Never does he forsake me. Never does he stop shining upon me. He's our light then. He's also our salvation. In fact, he can only be our light because he is our salvation. God is the infinitely pure light. In him is no darkness at all. And we are by nature darkness. And only if God is also our salvation can he shine upon us in his light and show mercy and grace to us. There are two words in our text which describe this salvation. One is translated salvation, and the other is strength of my life. One means deliverance or rescue, and the other one means preservation. He delivers us. He rescues us from all of our trials, from all of the dangers which surround us. That's David's confession here. Jehovah is my light and my salvation. As David goes into battle against his enemies, he does not trust in his own powers as a soldier. No, Jehovah is his light and his salvation. As David considers his sins and how grievous all of his sins were, he does not say to himself, well, I can save myself by keeping God's commandments more faithfully in the future. No, God, Jehovah, delivers me from my sins. He delivers me from 1,000 deaths each day. He delivers me from all of my sins without any of my works. He is also the strength of our life. He's a fortress. He's a mighty bulwark. He's a refuge. He's a stronghold. He's a safe haven. All those are possible translations of strength of our life. As David enters the battlefield, and as arrows are whizzing around his head, as it were, he does not trust in himself to preserve himself. He knows he is as vulnerable as any other man. But Jehovah preserves him. Jehovah preserves him even in the midst of his sins. Jehovah preserves him falling into sin so far that he can never come out of that sin again. Jehovah maintains and preserves his covenant with David. It does not depend upon David's faithfulness. If it did, he could never cry out, Jehovah is the strength of my life. Jehovah preserves me. Jehovah maintains his covenant with me. And Jehovah is also our salvation and our preservation by being our light. Think of the figure of a plant. A plant, you cover it up with a cloth, say, or a blanket, so no light can shine upon it. It withers and it dies. It must have light to live and continue to grow. And God is our light. We are, as it were, a tender plant. And if God were to stop shining upon us, even for a moment, in his love and in his favor and in his mercy, we would spiritually shrivel up and die. But God continually shines upon us in his grace and in his mercy and in his love.